What we're going to do now, just for the next 20 minutes, is just have some reflections with regards to what we've heard this morning. Now, I know that some of us have been here over the course of the last few hours, and others have been dipping in and out. Ben, do you want to just introduce yourself, so we know who you are, and then secondly, just any initial thoughts or reflections from Christian's talk just now, or from anything that you've heard this morning. So Ben, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hello, it's nice to be here and thanks for inviting me. So yeah, Ben Lepley from SRK, and I was a resource geologist for 11 years here, and then last year I transferred to the ESG team. So previously I was signing off as a competent person and on mineral resources, particularly for bulk commodities, but then I had a bit of an to the green side, and it's been uplifting hearing all the talk this morning about particularly from the JORC code, which is probably the most used code in the world. Certainly from what we see and seeing all the changes that are happening to the JORC code, some really major changes there. I know they're being replicated in the CIM as well, the Canadian Institute one, and SAM ESG, as Teresa was involved with a long time ago. 2017, I think the first ESG code integrating into the resource reporting code was released. So yeah, there's a lot changing, and actually I'm seeing a lot of attitudes changing on the ground. So one of the main reasons I wanted to go across the ESG side was to really kind of influence the geologists and kind of go backwards and say, look, this is what I'm discovering, and we really need to start integrating more of this into our workflow. And we're seeing it. And even in countries like last week I was in an ex-Soviet country, and you might think of some of those kind of countries as maybe slightly behind the times, but actually, with the new KazRC code, for example, in Kazakhstan, that they're really part of the CRISCO family of reporting codes. They are really changing things there. And so an example I can give is that they've started to omit certain resources from their inventories based on cultural and environmental reasons, which is a new thing. So yeah, there's some big changes going on. I'm just very pleased to see the progress.
Awesome, thanks for that, Ben. I think it's really exciting as well. So one of the reasons, firstly, it's absolutely fantastic to see you, but also you've been doing quite a lot of work with regards to the perception of mining or resources or whatever we want to call ourselves. You've been doing quite a lot of work on that recently. Do you want to give us a brief overview of what you've been up to?
Yeah, so through SRK, but also through the Critical Minerals Association, who I see around here somewhere. We've been trying to do a lot of work, trying to coordinate. There's so many resources out there, and there's so many people trying to do similar things in trying to increase public awareness of what mining actually is and what it isn't. And some of these talks we've had recently have really highlighted to me there's so many good things going on, and Christian kind of touched upon it. We don't emphasize this enough, that there's a lot of innovation going on, there's a lot of changes going on. Yes, there are still a lot of major failings that we have to acknowledge and talk about, but we also need to talk about the good stuff too, and the fact that we are so necessary to the transition as mineral extraction companies. I think that's my preferred term.
Awesome, thanks for that, Ben. Ben, we'll come back to you because I know that you've got a question for Christian, but Teresa, maybe if I can come to yourself, is there anything from this morning that's really resonated with you that you'd like to enhance? And then I'll go to Tom.
Well, I think we've done a fantastic job of painting the problem, painting the picture of the elephant that we need to eat. There are some solutions proposed to try and make mineral extraction or mining more attractive, make it more responsible. We've got pockets of excellence. We've got people who are talking to each other. We've got, disclosure frameworks and all the rest of it. Sometimes I get very impatient and I want change to happen faster than it does. The other side of me is very cynical, and my first approach is, you know, pull the other leg. I've heard the story a million times before. Nothing's really going to change, because what gets touted from boardrooms doesn't happen on the ground. So yeah, it's easy to feel a bit bewildered in this midst of all of these things that we're trying to navigate. But it's also exciting to be involved in the industry at this time, and to hopefully influence the way things go, so that the industry does deliver and become the value add and the long-term value created that it can be and needs to be.
Great, thanks for that, Teresa. I think very pragmatic viewpoint with regards to all of this. Tom, how about yourself? And then Christian, I know that you only joined us recently, but if there's anything else you'd like to add. So Tom, over to you.
Yeah, I not much to add. I think it's really interesting. There's loads of different people who had speaking this morning had very common themes, especially about this one about the need for very early engagement with regard to ESG, mineral exploration and things like that. And and I think there's been a lot of real positives about everyone talking about these things, and like Teresa was saying, identification of the problem. But then similarly, I think there's the recognition that the way the industry is set up and the way the whole system is set up is this very linear process, and that's going to be something that needs to change. It's so hard. I think it's going to be so hard to overcome that, because as I said, that's the way that this industry and many other industries are just geared up. I get overwhelmed by this sometimes, because this is a really complex problem. Which requires this kind of economy systems thinking approach. And I don't think this is something that's there's not loads of examples of where this is done really well, because it is undoubtedly really hard, and you can't escape that. But so I switch between being very positive about the fact that we're discussing these and thinking about these things to being quite despondent sometimes about the fact that it's so complicated. But I think there is real movement at the moment. Like I said, I think governments are really thinking about these things, and I'm really there's loads of really positive drivers, and I'm optimistic that we will see a positive change or I think we have to see a positive change in the coming years.
Great, thanks, Tom. Christian, how about yourself? And then I'll come back to Ben.
No, I agree in the sense that we need to be realistic, in the sense that the industry still has a lot of areas to improve. We still need to realize that there is a divergence between leaders and the rest of the industry. There needs to be a recognition that the work that has been improving on the ground needs to keep going and needs to become the norm. And I think keeping a serious commitment to that is the underlying and the fundamental first step that we all need to agree on. And the difference that I see now is that there is no pushback from the industry to recognize that. And the work is not being challenged, but it's been done. Whether it's been done at the pace that we need, whether we're improving as a whole industry, we can debate that, but I think we have that. The bit that is exciting now, and the thing that I always think about, how to unlock the level and speed of innovation that we need. And I was listening to the ESG presentation. Let's just imagine for a second what would happen if the financial sector would stimulate that innovation. These are capital-intensive companies, so how would it look like? What kind of ESG framing do we need to incentivize innovation and accelerate the transition? Not with a massive stick that puts a lot of cost on the existing model, but with enough clever carrots and clever sticks so that people is incentivized to move. That's one. But then you look at technology, and then you look at the engagement across the value chain, how to work with consumers, and with so those are areas that maybe with small changes of framing here and there, you open a massive opportunity. But keeping the context as it is and expecting for massive change is wishful thinking.
Yeah. So in terms of one of those carrots / sticks, Christian, and I realize I'm leaping in here into this discussion, but so something that we've certainly been playing with recently has been, okay, so with regards to the scope 1, 2, 3 footprints, okay, so let's just look at carbon for the moment. Yes, that will expand into ESG. Mining is critical in terms of providing the materials that are actually needed to induce this energy transition. At the moment, we as a sector get hammered in terms of, because we do produce some emissions, we can do this better. There are opportunities for carbon capture and storage. So really looking at the geological net zero, not the biosphere net zero, which is only temporary, but if we can lock it up in the rocks, then that really helps. And we are an industry that can actually make that happen. So if you say, right, hang on a second, if we revolutionize or innovate in the way that we actually mine to become a carbon sink, rather than somebody that just emits. And then also the entire world is looking for things to invest in with regards to their carbon offset is a dirty word. But at the moment, there is almost no incentive for mining companies to produce those critical materials to be able to flow into the demand that's actually coming from, you know, the likes of wind turbines, batteries, etc. Now there's a little bit, because everyone goes, oh yeah, we'll invest in you just like a normal company, but a lot of them come as byproducts or from really small deposits that, to be honest, aren't necessarily going to be that attractive with regards to the profitability in terms of them running. However, if you say, right, if you can prove that you are mining in a responsible way and you are processing in a responsible way, so you've got to be able to prove it, that then unlocks some form of tax break, subsidy, or whatever in that downstream scope 3 from the mining companies. But for everybody else investing, all of the impact investors, the green investors, everyone's going to be one of those very shortly. Suddenly you open the door to a very different form of finance compared to the fairly static pension funds, etc., that perhaps we have investing in the mining sector at the moment. Now, all of that said in an eloquent way at the moment, some of that might not work, some of it might work. I don't know, Christian, what your thoughts are in terms of that arm waving.
No. I agree with you. I mean, but this is the transformational. I mean, I like to put the extremes, no. So there is an extreme version of this where you have a mine that has zero emissions, locks in carbon physically, so it uses the deposit maybe to lock in carbon. Yeah. Does it not only to lock in its own emissions, but maybe it captures emissions and locks in carbon from other industries close by. So it's almost like as it starts to take out the copper and the gold and all of that, there's a hole in the ground. It uses it to lock carbon, and it becomes a carbon sink, as you was mentioning. But then next to it, there's also natural-based solutions projects. So there's large-scale agriculture, large-scale forestry. Next to it, there's also renewable energy that is, needs to be closed because you cannot have the dependency on the transmission lines being developed. It needs to be closed. And so you have a version of that operation that is creating value as a mining operation today, but it's transforming itself to, providing a number of carbon solutions as it runs out of the mineral in the next 50 years. Yeah. And that mineral is going into the wind farms and the electric vehicles and the batteries and so on. Now, that has a super optimized version where maybe you close the mine and you leave all the natural-based solutions, you have the renewable energy, you have the carbon sink around it, you're still operating and making profits around it, but you still own the metal that you extracted from that deposit, and you are now in the market of recovering, recycling, repurposing all that copper and gold that you put in the market. That goes beyond 200 years. So suddenly, your timeframes as a mine that say we are a 100, well, you are 100-time business, you are a 200-mine business. You don't have to deal with closure issues. You actually have footprint that you have developed and you still enjoy. And you have a new business in the markets where your product is. So the key question here is, how do we kickstart that process? Mm-hmm. And a simple example is a whole truck consumes between 1,000 to 3,000 liters of diesel a day. Wouldn't it be great if you have the same approach to any other vehicle of a subsidy to allow those trucks to become zero carbon? wouldn't that be super effective from a climate point of view? So that for me is a no-brainer. You know, if you have a lot of these old trucks in your territory and you want to reduce emissions, allow that transition to go first. Give them, you know, but no, we go and subsidize the smaller vehicles that are more difficult to maintenance, and that's fine. That's also something we have to do. But isn't that a low-hanging fruit?
Yeah.
And like that, you have many others, no?
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Christian. Great. So I think this is it. Like, where do we get those big levers that we can pull and actually enact the change rather than just talking about it? I think, Teresa, as you were just saying then, and actually going back to Veronique, who was one of our non-mining panelists yesterday, who went, well, I think the just transition is a load of rubbish. We just need to get on and do it. Let's stop talking. Let's do it. Ben, I know that you had a question for Christian. Do you want to go for it?
It's quite a pointed one, but you know, I think an important one, you know, for everyone really. But yeah, actually, you just mentioned something just now that struck me, and it was something that came from the GEOLSOC conference the other week about the investment in gold, the disproportionate investment in gold projects specifically, but also other vanity metals. So there's a lot of money and time and investment that goes into gold because it's seen as a safe haven. It's a good investment, right? Whereas actually we would prefer investment to go into critical minerals that are helping the transition, right? And I just had a look now, and it's something like 80% of gold is used for either storing in banks or for jewelry, right? So there's not really a case for it being that useful. So my question was, and maybe I shouldn't say just for the ICMM, but what I'm getting at is, you know, for the major mining companies who have the large scale mining operations, is there a legitimate kind of moral basis to continue this large scale mining of vanity kind of metals such as gold and gemstones, given the huge relative environmental impact with a low relative societal benefit?
Well, that's a big one, huh? And you focus it in.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, look, I think I think I have a personal view, and I have an answer that goes into what is happening. So people still buy gold, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is a market for gold, and so there is a reason. I mean, we can call it vanity, we can call it, you know, reserve, we can call it whatever we want to. But there is a huge market for gold. What drives that market? And there are experts that can tell us, you know, much better than myself. But it exists, and it's very active, and it's there. The second point on impacts and the environment, that was my previous point, in the sense that, you know, if you look at the mining companies, the gold mining companies, how much they have improved in their approach to communities, and how much they have improved in the use of water, how much they have improved in the use of chemicals and closure and so on in the last 5 years, it's impressive. Do we need to do more? Absolutely. And that is the job that needs to be done. You know, that is my point of, we are creating fantastic examples. We need to make that the norm. So at the operational level, I think that is the key. How do we make the examples the norm? And that is something that I don't see any challenge. I mean, in the case of gold, I don't see anybody saying, no, we shouldn't do that. No, absolutely not. Is there still work to do? Of course, and they recognize it.
I think you're right. We need to obviously change the fact that people are mining gold for a very specific reason, because it's worth a lot of money. It's only worth what we think it's worth, right? Just like with money. So we're only mining it because it's worth $18,000 dollars an ounce. Sorry, $1,800 an ounce. But if it wasn't worth that, then people wouldn't mine it. So that's the fact, right? I think we need to decouple it.
I know, but I think, look, I'll give you an example. I had a conversation with somebody in China, a Chinese young man. This was 2017, and he spent a huge amount of money in a diamond. And I look at it, and I thought it was okay. You know, I'm not. You know, I think diamonds are okay. You know, he grew up in extreme poverty, dreaming that when he was going to get married, he was going to do that. He was going to, you know, and the fact that he was able to save, to buy that diamond and give it to the person that he loved, transform his life. Now, you may think that that's vanity, and maybe it is, but for that person, is something that took 30, 35 years of his life to achieve. It brings so many things together. So are we going to stop that market? Is that morally right or wrong? Do we need to improve the operational performance? Do we need to, yes, we have to. Is it morally wrong or right? I think that that guy deserves that moment in his life.
Or is it better to point him towards synthetic diamonds?
I don't think it's an either or. I don't think it's an either or. I think synthetic diamonds are increasing their market share and they're going to keep going. And I think if you ask young people, it's almost, you know, I would like to travel. I don't want, you know, why I should spend this money in a diamond. I will go and travel. But if there is again a huge market for diamonds, and it exists and it is there. I think the point that we need to make is that there are fascinating opportunities to transform these operations and these business models that today we are having the conditions to dream about it and to make them real. The conditions that we can push to have today didn't have before. There was no conversation about the just transition 5 years ago. There was little conversation about climate in the way we have it 5 years ago, with all these targets for net zero across countries and companies. So right now we really have an opportunity to make dreams real. And that door is going to close in the next 10 years. So let's make the most of it. That's what we need to think about. Not, again, sticks are necessary. We need to keep that rigor, but let's look at the carrots.
Resonating words there. Let's look for those carrots. Now, I've got one more question just to pose to the panel, and Tom, I'm going to come to you first with it. And this comes in from Olga in the chat, and she asks, good morning from Poland. Hello, Poland. I have a question. How do you think the EU taxonomy regulations will influence the mining industry? Tom, what do you reckon? And then I'm happy to have anybody else jump in.
Yeah, so my knowledge of this is quite superficial, and I imagine Olga probably knows more about this than I do. So this is, I think, relates to the green taxonomy regulate things that the EU are bringing in. So this is essentially a list of definitions of kind of what some of these terms mean. So going to help investors understand, you know, how they can essentially do sort of green investment as part of the kind of European Green Deal. And this, I think I'm interested in this because this relates a little bit to what I was talking about earlier about alignment, about standards. And I think this is something I think the UK are talking about doing as well. And I think this is really important. I can't comment about how investors are going to relate to this, but I think, you know, it is really important. There's so much talk about, you know, sustainability and green this, green that, but there's so little basis behind a lot of it. So I think this is a really important effort from the EU to standardize some of this and put some hard and fast definitions that people have to adhere to. So everyone's talking from the same, you know, everyone's talking kind of from the same book and using the same definitions, and hopefully that will sort of overcome things like, you know, greenwashing and people just banding these terms around. So I think this is really good. I don't know how this is going to affect investor decisions, but you know, I'm all for these kind of standardization, alignment, and I think there needs to be kind of more of this. And I very much, you know, think it's a good idea. But
okay, thanks for that, Tom. Christian, do you have any comments on the EU taxonomy?
It's a fantastic lever, no? I mean, and it requires deep engagement. When you think about, for example, the discussions that have been happening with gas, do you include gas or take it out from the taxonomy? Do you give time for gas? Is there a role for gas? That I think we should look at very carefully, not to have a position on gas, but to understand the dynamics. No, gas was, you know, framed as a transition fuel. And it was at the top of the priorities to decarbonize the world until it suddenly has no place when we look at the EEI analysis net zero by 2050. And so as an industry, right now we're entering an interesting position where organizations like the EIA are saying, look, if you look at trade and if you look at the intensity of materials going forward, and decarbonization, minerals and metals are absolutely crucial. So engaging in this conversation and understanding which kind of transitions we're going to be playing and what are the conditions that markets are going to be putting for the minerals and metals to enter those markets, having deep engagement to frame that conversation, to have the conversation actively is crucial. And it's crucial not to stop it or derail it, or it's crucial to shape it in a way that we do have access, and we have it in a way that drives a just transition. And maybe there is space for us to engage more in that space.
Great, thank you for that, Christian. So I think, Olga, just with regards to your question about the EU taxonomy, we do have a number of people coming to speak to us. So Johannes on Friday, for example, he's been involved in some of those aspects from the mining perspective. So we might be able to get some more information for you there. So just in closing, because I know that our lovely panelists do need to disappear off in approximately 2 minutes, just to work our way around the room, any final words of wisdom? Christian, let's start with yourself, and then we will go to Tom.
Let's look at carrots and sticks.
Carrots and sticks. Awesome. Brilliant, brilliant vision. Tom, how about yourself? And then we'll go to Teresa.
I think it's all about sort of using all these different tools and ideas together to sort of leverage the maximum value that we can out of any extraction we do. And I think that's really important. Brilliant.
Thank you. Teresa, how about yourself? And then we'll go to Ben.
We've got to have the hard conversations between ourselves as stakeholders in the industry, and as part of those conversations, we've got to listen to what other people are saying and reflect on it, because with that reflection, hopefully we can change the way that the industry needs to.
Awesome, thank you. And Ben, how about yourself?
We need to integrate ESG into everything.
Just
and
like
I'm talking about mineral resources, mineral reserves, exploration. We really need to start at the beginning and integrate it throughout. It's not a standalone discipline. It needs to be integrated throughout, and that's something that came up in the JORC Code talk earlier. But I think that's a great message.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ben. And then just from my perspective, I've got notes all around me at the moment, but I think some of my summary thoughts have come together is, what is the total value of that asset through different moments in time? And that value not just being monetary value, but the natural capital, the social capital, etc. So how do we actually measure that? And how do we spin, or how do we revolutionize this business model so that it actually works for resources companies to be that keystone in that circular economy, to say, yeah, we need those raw materials coming in from their primary sources, but also being a big part of that recycling node as well, to enable us to make use of all of those durables. So I think with that, really, really fantastic input this morning. This morning's session has been perhaps more technical, perhaps, than some of the sessions we had yesterday. It's been a really interesting shift in dynamic. This afternoon at 3 o'clock, we start for session number 5 of 8. So we've reached the halfway mark, everybody. Absolutely fantastic. We've got another, 7, 8 fantastic individuals lined up for you this afternoon to share their thoughts and perspectives. Thank you so, so much for all of our wonderful speakers we've had this morning. Massive round of applause for everybody, and have a nice lunch. There we go. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.